Episode 170, Hunter-Gatherers, Organic Workloads, and a Change Worth Making. This is the World Organic News for the week ending 27th of May 2019. John Moore reporting. Decarbonise the air and recarbonise the soil. The project I spoke about last week is coming along nicely, and I'll have lots more to tell you soon. Today I need to dive back into my personal history. Fear not, I won't be oversharing. Whilst at university I studied archaeology. This discipline only deals with humans, so no dinosaurs, just humans. The greater part of human existence was spent by us in the gentle arts of the fisher hunter-gatherer. Now this was sold to me as a lifestyle not worth the effort during my school days. You know the story. Civilization arose in the Fertile Crescent, China and Mesoamerica, and slowly at first, but then with increasing rapidity, the bright lights of civilization were brought to the whole world. What caused me to question this assumption, apart from what the Mongols did, but that's another podcast, was the interface of two opposing food systems. The gardening-based cultures of Papua New Guinea and the fisher hunter-gatherers of far north Queensland in Australia. A well-developed garden culture involving a carb staple of taro or yams, with pigs and chickens feeding people reasonably well. The alternative was an equally well-developed, even older culture of fishing, hunting and gathering. The question I had is this: if the gardening culture was so much better, as we'd been sold at school, and it was a stage leading to civilization after all, why did the good denizens of far north Queensland not adopt this gardening system? At this time, in the first half of the 1990s, the argument was that the far north Queensland people didn't see the benefits of changing. Now all this is a long way round to our first article this week, from Ars Technica, entitled Hunter-Gathering Seems to have been easier than farming. That might be the clue. Quote, a paper published in Nature Human Behaviour explores how this shift affects the time budgets of hunter-gatherers in the Philippines, finding that women who participate in agricultural work have far less leisure time, around half the leisure time of women who prioritise foraging. End quote. Leisure time is not time designed to be spent on PlayStations or smartphones, but in conversation with other humans, thinking, listening to sounds of nature and so on. Indeed, it seems fisher-gatherer hunters spend as little as 4 hours a day in the actual process of not just procuring food, but processing and consuming it. The point I am eventually getting to is that somewhere we missed a trick. In the industrial world, thanks to pesticides, herbicides, chemical fertilisers et al., we spend between 6 and 10% of our incomes on food. Now, if we use money as a proxy for time, fisher-gatherer hunters spend about 17% of their time. Spend about 17% of their time on food production and acquisition. Yet in less developed places, people spend between 40 and 57% of their income on food. And this was the case for most of human agricultural history. We got a bad deal as a species. Of course, the small percentages in industrialised nations don't cover the true cost of the food. Health costs, topsoil loss, polluted waters, and on, all push that percentage higher. My thought back in the last millennium was, what if we could live like fisher-gatherer hunters, but with the range of foods available to us now through agriculture? Always drawn to our organic method since I first met John Seymour through his complete guide to self-sufficiency, the thing I really didn't like was all the physical labour involved. Our second article from Salon, entitled Organic Food is Booming, but it's grinding field labourers into the dirt, confirms this. Quote, synthetic pesticides and genetically modified crops are effective. That's not my quote, that's the quote from Salon. By choosing not to use them, organic agriculture requires more manually intensive labour, sometimes as much as 35% more. Herbicides used in organic farming are often less effective at eradicating weeds, requiring more physical weeding. Because organic farms don't use as much fertiliser, cover crops are needed to enhance soil nitrogen levels, which in turn increases the amount of labour time invested in each field. End quote. Now this, of course, is the industrial argument against organic farming, and it also fails to take into account the changes over the past 2 decades, Regenerative practices require far less labour. They in essence mimic the fisher-gatherer-hunter model using agriculturally selected species. They require data managers rather than technicians and labourers. I'm not disparaging the farmers who have toiled to tame nature. I am saying we now have ways that work with nature and therefore require far less physical effort. Using the systems evolved over 4.6 billion years, rather than attacking those systems, attempting to smash the weeds by industrial methods, will and do make our lives easier. We can do this from a suburban garden outward. Let's run a thought experiment. How many lawns are there in a suburb? How much fuel is used to keep it cut? How much glyphosate is sprayed on edges? How much glyphosate is used by local councils and bushland regenerators? Now see those same inputs replaced by systems using the succession of plants. See a tiny start, say 10% of backyards converted from lawn to no-dig vegetable and flower gardens, fruit trees planted on boundary edges, chooks, rabbits and even guinea pigs used to edge and graze areas of grass and clover. The benefits from a human health perspective are reason enough. The bonus of turning a tenth of suburbia into a carbon sink only adds to the positives. My position on organic farming reaches the same conclusion as the cited quote, but from a different starting point. I have observed a registered organic farm at work. The levels of labour involved are quite staggering. The place was run on a John Seymour basis, double digging, using ploughs, all that sort of stuff. Basically chemical agriculture with the chemical inputs removed and the use of compost. Huge amounts of diesel, soil turned 3 times before planting and so on. This obviously led to the need for extensive weeding and a large labour force, mostly unpaid students and volunteers, but some paid labourers. So the poorer parts of the world are filling people's lives with the need to spend around half their incomes on food. The industrial ag of the richer parts is destroying the biosphere, and the organic solution has carbon effects not dreamt of by John Seymour and those who followed the return to the land organic systems from the 1960s and 70s. We have moved since my moment of questioning in the early 1990s to a series of ideas. The organic example, the sustainability paradigm, to the regenerative model. Forcing people to labour for half their lives to feed themselves or outsourcing human labour to fossil fuels are not sustainable ideas. The wonderful thing about natural systems is their ability to bounce back to different levels of equilibrium. A forest burnt in a wildfire will, with sufficient time and rainfall, return to a similar state to the pre-fire forest. It will be different but substantially the same forest in a state of equilibrium. An even more hopeful example is what happens when a glacier retreats. We can reconstruct the ecological succession of plants from pollen evidence when this occurred at the end of the last glacial period, about 10 to 12,000 years ago. The exposed soils of today are similar to those that were left behind when the glaciers retreated, and they can be rehabilitated quickly using the same successions. And this idea too can be applied to soils decimated by chemical applications. The key to basically all soil problems is the building of biological activity. We have around us many examples of people who mimic nature and manage to grow both food and soil, and they have been the subject of numerous episodes of this particular podcast. Masanobu Fukuoka, zero budget farming, biodynamics and permaculture, to name a few. We have all the data we need to get this revolution started. Imagine a world where the soil is covered, never leaks CO2, increases in biological complexity, and cleans the waters of the world. Just imagine. Clean, decarbonised air, towns and cities quiet through the use of electric vehicles, rivers flushed clean of toxins, and the seas cleansed of plastics. Imagine, indeed, a world fit to live in. And damn it, it's not that difficult to achieve. And on that note, I'll draw this episode to a conclusion. Podcasting checklists are still available over at John Moore Podcasting Services, link in the show notes if you're interested in starting your own show. Thanks for listening. I'll be back next week.